All right, we're here live at HMPS 2026 in Salt Lake City, beautiful Salt Lake City.
Oh yeah.
You know, how many times have you been here before, Charmaine?
This conference, Salt Lake City, 3, 4.
Yeah. It's a great place. Well, I'm sitting here talking with my dear friend and colleague, Charmaine Weis.
That's right.
Charmaine, before we get started on today's conversation, want to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am the System Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Hospital Sisters Health System in the Midwest. Prior to that role, I was consulting for about 4.5 years with CEOs all over the country. And then prior to that, I was at the same health system for 23 years.
23 years.
Yes, and I literally grew up with my CEO. So I've worked with the CEO for a really long time, multiple CEOs around the country, and now I've been working with my current CEO for just about 4 months.
And you're really good at it. And that's why you're here at this conference, because you talked about the CEO Playbook. That was your session. So in my experience, I've seen a lot of CEOs too, worked with them as well. Helping to be a strategic partner to a CEO sometimes can be a bit challenging.
Yes, but it's all about the relationship. So I would say if the first time the CEO is calling you and it's a crisis, and that's the first time you're really getting to know your CEO, it's too late. It's about being proactive, being strategic, and being authentic, and really being yourself and building that relationship. It is that relationship that defines everything in how you work together and how you get your CEO to be that strategic thinker, and really including communications as a strategic driver.
I think it's very important for organizations to really embolden their CEOs, strengthen the way that they can actually communicate with their communities, with the media, with all of their constituents, quite frankly. And that's something that sometimes is not intuitive to a CEO. Is that fair?
That is very fair. I'm working with a CEO right now. This is his first role as a system-wide CEO. And so we sit down and we talk about his goals, and his goals by target audience. So how do you want to show up with your colleagues and the rest of the hospital and health system employees? How do you want to show up in the advocacy realm, and how do we want to position yourselves? And so we really do sit down and we think about the change that he wants to evoke, and then how do we set him up to be successful in that change. And a lot of times it takes strategic planning, and we actually have sat down and we've built out content themes for the year, and we're focusing on those content themes, and then how do we elevate his voice around those themes.
You know, as you're describing this, I mean, it sounds very much like a communications plan that you're doing,
right.
But you're doing it for an individual, a very important individual within an organization. And I would say that, most CEOs, they might undervalue the role that the chief communications and marketing officer can be, or a communications marketing officer, VP as yourself, because they typically look at you as like, you're just there to deal with the problems and when there's a crisis. So how do you, today you talked about helping people in your role elevate themselves that way. So let me go back to those 3 things that you talked about. The first was be proactive. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think you have to think 1 and 2 steps ahead of your CEO. So, for me, when I got into this role, it was very much, we're going to figure out the content for what you need to be saying 30 minutes before you're saying it. And I'm like, we can't work that way. We need to actually plan out your thought leadership calendar. And so that's what I did, is I built him a year-long plan around themes. So that's be proactive. Be smart and strategic is, you have to be 1 and 2 steps ahead. So when I know what's on his mind and what's most important to him, I'm going to be out researching and actually pulling data around key topics. And so, if there's a win around, ratings and reviews and, something that health systems are advocating for, then I'm going to pull that information for him. If we're working on an op-ed, we just recently worked on an op-ed around 340B and pulled insights and background from all over the country. What CEOs are saying what at this time, what's pharma saying, right? So that other side of the conversation, and then what's happening in advocacy and in legislation, and how can we actually impact legislation. He ended up writing his most successful op-ed, and it was from a Catholic moral perspective. First time I've seen that approach anywhere in the industry.
I think that's fantastic what you're talking about, because clearly you're going out there, you're doing all the critical research, you're understanding what's happening locally, but also on a macro level, right? And you're tying those themes together to what's happening within your organization, what's important to your organization. It's not to say that the CEO doesn't have the ability to do that, but to have a number two like you, that I would assume it becomes very, very good partnership.
And those partnerships don't happen overnight. So the third thing is be yourself, right? Be authentic and be candid and be willing to have great conversations and be humble. I think the key to success is building a partnership of trust, and that happens through micro moments over time, and you've got to be willing to invest that time to make those relationships happen.
And showing up as yourself and being authentic, right? That there's so much to be said about healthcare and the challenges that we have, but I think one theme that I'm seeing all around is that we have to authentically be there and build those relationships. Otherwise, it's going to be a challenge, whatever it might be, from a marketing, comms perspective, executive outreach perspective. Having the authenticity and the ability to show up presently, that becomes really, really critical. I assume that you have a tight relationship with your CEO. You've probably built tight relationships with a number of CEOs over the years, right? And that probably has also benefited you.
I think it's a win-win. When you build a relationship and you build a strategic thought partner in the industry and you're elevating your CEO in that process, it's a natural trust that gets developed in that process, and I think it's just a natural progression for you in your career. And my best feedback and guidance for anybody new in this role is you have to invest the time to get to know your CEO. I texted him on Sunday. I said, it's Sunday. I know what you're doing right now. I know you're reading email and researching. I want you to take a look at this research and tell me what you think. And he responded within 20 minutes. He was like, yeah, this is great, because I knew exactly what he was doing at that time of day.
I think that's I remember when you said that when we talked yesterday, I was like, the insight, it's like you're his friend, his confidant, and his partner to advance things. I think that is tremendous, and that's what you talked about here today. And that's just, sort of reflects what you bring, Charmaine, to this organization, to this industry. And I think having more people like you helping to really navigate all of the challenges, because the challenges are going to keep coming.
They are.
And they're going to be different. We just have to, if we have that relationship and that trust, that's critical.
Yeah, it's inside baseball, but it's also human nature, right? And we're all humans. We can't be intimidated by our CEOs. We got to find a way to actually build a relationship with them and work with them.
I love that. We're all humans.
Right.
Just building a human relationship. Charmaine, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights.
Thank you for inviting me, Chris. It's been a pleasure.